everyone, and welcome to Motuts, Motion Made Easy. My name is John Navarro, and today we'll be giving you the second installment of our Godzilla title tutorials. This one is inspired by the Godzilla King of Monsters trailer that came out in 2019, and this is all in a lead up to the new Godzilla vs. Kong movie that'll be released later this month. So let's get started. We're going to start by opening up a new motion project. I'm going to set my motion project at 1080p broadcast HD at a frame rate of 24 frames per second. Now that I have my project open, what I want to do is I want to start by creating my groups. So I'm going to create 4 groups. The first group we're going to call background. The second group I want to call title. The third group is going to contain our fog. The fourth group is going to contain our debris particles. And then finally what I want to do is select all 4 groups, right click, and nest those into a new group which we will call finished. Lastly, let's add a light. Now I want to turn this light layer off for the time being so that I can just work with the groups and not have to worry about the light affecting anything that we're doing right now. So let's start with the background group. The first thing we want to do is add a gradient. So let's go into Library, Generators, and select Gradient. Apply the gradient to the background layer, and now let's stylize this group. Let's go back into the gradient group, and I want to select the gradient, go into the inspector, and we're going to keep the gradient in a grayscale. And then on top of the gradient, I want to add some smoke. So to do this, we're going to go into the library, let's go down to Content, and then let's open up the search tool and let's type in cloud. I want to select the very dim cloud PNG and then click apply. Next, to create the emitter, I want to hit the E key. Let's go back into the gradient group. I want to adjust the starting position on the y-axis to -600 and the end position on the y-axis to 1920. Okay, with the gradient group done, let's lock that off and go to the smoke. Now, in our particle emitter, we're going to adjust the settings. Make sure 3D is checked. First thing I want to do is go into the inspector, open the emitter tab, and then I want to change the shape to box. Next, I want to change the arrangement to random fill. Let's twirl open the size settings, and I want to set the depth to 1080. For the emission angle, I want to set that to 90 degrees. I want to set the emission longitude to 90 degrees, and I want to set the emission range to 90 degrees. Make sure that depth ordered is checked, interleave particles is checked, and face camera is checked. Now, in the cell controls, let's crank that up to 300 for the birth rate. Let's make the birth rate random 25. Let's set the life to 8, the life randomness to 2, the speed to 200, the speed randomness to 10, and let's adjust the angle to 180 degrees, the angle randomness to 30 degrees. Let's add a spin of 5 degrees and a spin randomness of 10 degrees. Make sure additive blend is checked, and we want to keep the color mode original. Finally, let's set the scale randomness to 200. So now with our smoke layer created, what I want to do is adjust the parameters for the position. So let's go into the Properties tab, and for the y-axis, let's drag that down. I want to drag this down to about -450. Now the last thing I want to do to this smoke emitter is I want to create a gradient blur. What I want this to do is as the smoke rises, I want it to blur out and kind of fade away. So let's go back into the library, let's go into filters, let's select blur and then gradient blur. Apply that to the smoke emitter that we just created. Now open up the gradient blur parameters, go into the inspector. We want to set the 0.1 y-axis to -975, the 0.2 y-axis to 245, the amount to 15, and we can leave everything else at its defaults. Now that we've created our first smoke emitter, I want to duplicate this emitter 2 more times. With the first duplicate, let's rename the original Smoke and pull the duplicate below that and rename that one Vapor. And for this third copy, we're going to rename this Displacement. We can lock the background for now, and let's move to the title layer. So in the title layer, let's choose our text tool. Let's click in the preview window, and let's type in our title, Godzilla. So now that we have our foreground title created, we're going to change the font. Again, the font that I used for this is called Kelowna Condensed. You can find this font on dafont.com, and I will include a link to this font in the description. And the font I use for the Japanese characters is a font called Meloric. This is pre-built into Apple Motion. Go to Google Translate, type in Godzilla, and then copy and paste the Japanese characters that it's translated into. You want to copy that into the second text layer. So now that we have our foreground title and our background title created, let's go in and change some of the settings and adjust the appearance. So with the Godzilla layer selected, the first thing I want to do is I want to set the font size to 450 for the top part. For the bottom portion, the King of Monsters, let's reset the alignment to center, and I want to set the line spacing to -90. You'll see why in a moment. Now let's go into Properties. Let's reset the position, and I want to adjust the Y-axis to -75. I also want to adjust the anchor point to +100. For the King of Monsters portion, let's select and highlight that line, and then I want to set the font to American Captain. You can download this font from dafont.com as well. I will leave a link in the description. And I want to set the font size to 160 and the tracking to 3%. Now, what I want to do is condense the height of the subtitle without changing the overall size. So what I'm going to do is scroll down to Scale, and on the Y scale, I'm going to reduce this to about 50%. Now this looks a little bit closer to our trailer inspiration. Let's continue. Now let's go into the Appearance tab, and I want to change the face color. So click on the color, and I want to choose turquoise. Now that that's done, let's select the Japanese characters, and I want to format the font to Meloric, the font size to 300, and I want to set the line spacing to -100. Let's go into the Appearance tab. I want to change the color to teal, and I also want to reduce the darkness of this. And then go into Properties. Let's reset the position parameters, and I want to set the X-axis to -15. Let's set the anchor point to -175, and now we're all done. So now, with our title done, what I want to do is I want to add an image mask so that this comes on with a gradient, similar to the one that you saw in the trailer example. So let's select our shape tool. Let's just draw a rectangular shape around the title. The color really doesn't matter. So now with the shape drawn, I'm going to go into the shape geometry, and I'm just going to adjust the size a little bit. I want to adjust the width to 1440 and the height to 640. Now, what I want to do is I want to increase the feather. So we're going to crank the feather up to 200, and I want to reduce the fall off to -100. We can leave the color at white. So now with that shape created, let's select the Godzilla text, and what I want to do is I want to add an image mask. So let's go to Object, Add Image Mask, or Shift-Command-M, and then in the image mask, well, I want to drag that rectangle shape. I want to change the mask blend mode to subtract, and I want to animate the mask position. So let's select the rectangle. Let's go to the beginning of the project. Let's add a keyframe on the Y-axis, and then let's go to the, let's say 1 second and 8 frames. And then we want to drag the Y-axis down to -700. So now when we play that back, you can see that there's a gradual gradient where the Godzilla title is not there. All we see are the Japanese characters, and then the gradient falls off and the title appears. If you remember in the trailer example, the subtitle, the King of Monsters part, pops on word by word. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to add a sequence behavior. So go into behaviors, go into text animation, and select sequence text. Now with the sequence text behavior selected, what we want to do is we want to add a parameter, and what we're going to do is adjust the opacity. So select add, format, opacity. And what we want to do is we want the opacity to start at 0, and we want to animate this by word. Also, I want to adjust the start offset to 1. This will make sure that our animation begins after the word Godzilla appears. So we want this sequence text to start at the beginning, and then we want it to end at around the 6-second mark, and then just hit the O key for the out point. So now that that's done, you'll see that as the Godzilla title comes on, the King of the Monsters subtitle pops in one word at a time. And this way, that animation will end by the 6-second mark. Next, we want to give it a little bit of a glow and choose bloom. Then in the inspector, what I want to do is I want to crank the bloom up to 32. Reduce the threshold to 33. And then what we want to do is add a parameter behavior to the threshold. So let's just click on the down arrow, add parameter behavior, and we want to add a wriggle behavior. Now, let's set the amount to 3. Let's set the frequency to 0.05, the wriggle offset to 0. Let's set the noisiness to 0.7. And again, you can play around with the random seed. So now that that's all done, our title layer is done. The last thing that we need to do to the Japanese characters is just give it the illusion of a backglow. So let's select the Japanese characters, let's go into text, and let's go into the appearance. What I want to do is I want to turn on glow. I want to make the color of this glow that turquoise color. I want to increase the blur to 10. We can leave the radius at 5. And then I want to reduce the scale to 96%. And make sure that layer order is set to underface. Now you'll see that that gives this nice illusion that's going to be coming from the light. So now with the title and the background layer done, let's move on to the fog. So to add the fog, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the library. And we are going to go to particle emitters. We're going to go into nature. And we're going to choose fog floor. Let's add the fog floor to the fog group. And there really isn't much that we're going to do to this other than change up some of the sizes. So select the fog floor. Again, make sure that 3D is checked. We want to change the shape to box. I want to increase the size width to 760. And we can leave the height and the depth to 300. And then I want to set the columns to 20, the rows to 20, and the ranks to 20. So I want to crank those all the way up. For the birth rate, I want to crank that up to 500%. I want the life of this to be 130%, the speed to be 125%, and you can leave the spin at its default. We're also going to colorize the fog. So let's go into filters, color, and choose colorize. And then in the inspector, we're going to remap the white channel to the turquoise color. So now, before locking this layer off, what I want to do is I want to shift the position of the fog. So let's go into the properties and let's adjust the y-axis, and I want to bring the fog down -700 pixels on the y-axis. So now with the fog layer complete, let's go back into the background layer. Let's select the vapor layer and let's start stylizing this. The first thing I want to do is I want to change the particle image. So let's go into library, click on content, and in the search window, type in flame. I want to choose the True Flame 5X PNG and apply that to our group. In the inspector window, let's choose the vapor group, and down in the particle image source well, let's drag and drop the True Flame 5X PNG. You'll instantly see a change. Now if we go back into the vapor group and go into the properties, let's change the blend mode from normal to difference. And now you see that the vapor group is interacting with the smoke in the background as well as the fog in the foreground. And if we scrub through, this looks like more of a natural kind of fire burning smoke that's rising from a heat source. And now I want to make some changes to the emitter controls so that we can adjust the appearance. First thing I want to do is click on 3D and change the emission shape from point to wave. Next, I want to adjust the start and end points so that we can stretch this across the length of the composition. Next, we want to make the starting point minus 960 on the x-axis, leave the y-axis at 0, and the end point to plus 960 on the x-axis. Again, leave the y-axis at 0. We want to set the amplitude to 100 and the frequency at 2. Now, in the frequency, I want to click this down arrow and I want to add a parameter behavior. And what I want to do is I want to randomize the frequency. So select randomize. Now in the behaviors tab, what I want to do is I want to set the apply mode to multiply, the frequency to 20, and the noisiness to 1. Let's go back into the emitter and everything else is going to stay roughly the same. We're going to change the birth rate random from 25 to 30. We're going to change the life to 5, the life randomness to 5. We're going to increase the speed to 250. We're going to leave the speed randomness at 10, and then we're going to change the angle to 90 degrees, the angle randomness to 15, the spin to 10, and the spin randomness to 5. We also want to change the color mode from original to over life, and we want to set this to a gradient. So this is going to be a neutral gradient. For the scale, I want to increase that to 315%. You can lock this layer off and move on to the debris layer. So select the debris layer, and what we're going to do here is we're going to add another particle emitter. So let's go into library, choose content, click on the search tool, and then type in confetti. We're going to select the confetti MOV and apply that to the debris layer. Now that we've applied that to the debris layer, let's go in and make some adjustments. So I want to select the confetti. I want to hit E for emitter, then go into the emitter, check off 3D, change the shape to box, change the arrangement to tile fill, and then I want to increase the width to 1080, the height to 960, and the depth to 540. We can leave the columns and rows at 5, and let's crank up the ranks to 20. I want the emission angle of this to be 90 degrees, the emission longitude to be 90 degrees, and the range to be 360 degrees. This will make sure that there's an upward disbursement of the particles in a 360 degree perimeter so that it feels like it's filling the space. Let's make sure that depth ordered is checked, interleave particles is checked, and that this is also facing camera. Now, I want to adjust the birth rate to 15, the birth random to 2. Let's set the life to 5, the life randomness to 10. We can leave the speed at 100 and just change the speed randomness to 20. I want to adjust the angle to 30 degrees and the angle randomness to 180 degrees. Let's also add a 5 degree spin and a spin randomness of 15 degrees. Make sure the additive blend is checked, and we want to set the color mode to be over life. Now, we want to click on the color over life tab, and in the drop down, we want to choose burnt ember. Now, in this third color from the left, we want to click on that and then just click in the color tab and reset this color to the turquoise color. So now that that's set, let's change the scale to 25%. Let's set the scale randomness to 75, and we're done. So now with the debris layer done, we're pretty much almost finished. Let's lock this off and let's do some of our finishing touches. So let's select the finish group. And so what I want to do here is add a letterboxing widescreen look to the entire composition. So let's go into the library, select filters, open the search window, and type in widescreen. Choose widescreen and apply that to the finished group. Now, select the widescreen filter, and in the inspector window, we want to create the border size. So let's increase that to 10, and let's change the aspect ratio to 1.78/1. And now we have our widescreen letterbox look. Let's go back into the background layer. Let's open that. And let's go into the bottom emitter copy, and let's change the blend mode of that layer to difference. Now, the last thing we need to do is create that kind of displacement effect on the text so that it looks like the heat that's radiating from these clouds is affecting the title the way it does in the trailer. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to select the title layer and we want to add a bump map filter. So let's go to Library, Filters, click on the search tool and type in bump. Choose bump map and apply that to the title group. Then choose the bump map, and in the inspector window, what we want to do, we want to select that displacement copy that we created in the smoke group and drag it into the source well. Now, once we drag this into the source well, what we want to do is adjust the vertical scale. We want to go to the beginning, create a keyframe, set the vertical scale to 0, then drag the playhead to about 1 second, and we want to change the vertical scale to minus 0.02. So now you'll see when we scrub through this, the title kind of moves a little bit and it's being affected by the particle emitter from the displacement smoke that we created. So now let's finish this up by turning our light back on. I want to change the light color to teal. Next, I want to select the background layer, go into Libraries, Filters, choose Color, and apply the Colorize filter. Let's change the white output to teal. And now our Godzilla King of Monsters title is complete. The last part is to export this, so let's go to File, Share, and I like to just share mine to Apple devices. It keeps the file size small and compressed. So if you're going to use this in a film or as a show open, then you're going to want to export this as the movie default. So choose the export method that you'd like. Just go into settings, make sure that the quality is set to better quality, name your file, click next, and that's it. That's our Godzilla King of Monsters title. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for joining us today at Motuts Motion Made Easy. My name is John Navarro. If you enjoyed this content, please click the like and subscribe button below. Please also leave any suggestions that you have for future tutorials in the comments section. Follow us on social media. We'd love to engage. And don't forget to check in next Monday for our Motion Mondays, where we'll have a brand new title tutorial. Until then, take care.